¡Qué show, qué show! ¿Cómo están, banda? Espero estén muy, pero muy bien. Hoy, en Grupo Inframundo, en los artistas del inframundo, tenemos a un director estrella, un director que les va a encantar. Así es, Bryan Trenchard-Smith, el director de Leprechaun 3, el director de Leprechaun 4 en el espacio, y también de Demons 2, y muchas más películas serie B que, híjole, tienen que verlas ahora mismo. Pero bueno, recuerden, gente, que cuando estemos en estas entrevistas pueden activar los subtítulos que están acá en YouTube, aquí arriba, los pueden activar y pues nada, les va a traducir los subtítulos para que puedan verlo en español y pues nada, pueden disfrutar esta entrevista con palomitas y lo que quieran. Pero bueno, ahora sí, me voy a traducir otra vez en inglés y empecemos. Hello, Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. It is a real pleasure to have you in Artists from Underworld. I was telling the people like like a little biography of the films you have done, but it is incredible to have you here.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but first of
It's
all, I want to tell the people, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Mexico? Because I know you have been in Mexico, so it will be
yeah.
incredible to know what was your experience in shooting movies and the TV series Tarzan. So I don't know if you could tell us a little bit of that, it will be incredible.
Well, I had a wonderful experience in Mexico, particularly on the Tarzan series, where I shot 12 of the episodes of season 1 in Palenque and Zihuatanejo. Well, in Palenque. The other film I made, directed or tried to direct, was called Day of the Assassins with Chuck Connors, the rifleman, Glenn Ford, and Jorge Rivero, and Andres Garcia, and Susana Dos Amantes. Produced by Carlos Vasallo, with whom I did not exactly get along.
Okay.
And the film is a mess.
Okay.
But I enjoyed working in Mexico. It was much better working in Palenque with a crew known as, I think, the Aguilar. No, they were known as the Aguilar crew, the Eagle crew. They were from the Stick Union, I think. Anyway, they came from Churubusco Studios, but
Okay.
they came down to the bottom end of Mexico, and we all stayed in this big hotel, and we had a great time. Much tequila was consumed. I got a taste for Bohemia, and other things, and had a wonderful time shooting at Agua Azul.
Wow.
Oh yeah, that's where we had Tarzan's hut. Well, Tarzan's treehouse was built there, and I'd love to go back and swim in those waters again. I think they did some of Predator around there too.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
right.
it was a totally Mexican crew with I think we ended up with a Canadian director of photography. We previously had a Frenchman, but that didn't work out. I had a wonderful first assistant director. His name was Rene Riabayal, who was probably quite a grand old man of the Mexican film community by now. And he was a unit production manager on quite a few big American productions that shot in Mexico. Anyway, I loved Rene, good guy. I've lost touch with him now. But he's, I hope, still somewhere, giving somebody the benefit of his expertise as he did for me. But we had a good time, and in Australia, we have a more sort of egalitarian attitude towards our working colleagues in film, or certainly it was the case in 1970 when I got going. And so, we'd all eat and drink together. We'd all look at the dailies of the movie together. It was a a collective experience of, which, was to execute my particular vision, but it was, a collaborative experience where everyone, brought their best to their particular roles. And I tried to bring that spirit to Mexico when I came down to do Tarzan. I was not able to bring it to the Carlos Vasallo production, but anyway.
But that's incredible because you bring it with Tarzan, and I think we can watch it in a lot of episodes. So I think that's magical,
Yeah. I mean, the scripts were pretty dumb. I would have written better scripts myself, but, the gig was to execute the episodes in 4 days each, in blocks of 3. So a 12-day shoot, 2 6-day weeks would, produce, 3 episodes, and then I would prep 3 more episodes while another director did the same. And but I ended up doing 12 of the first season. I chose not to go back to the second season because they moved to Puerto Vallarta, and it was not going to be and there were going to be I wouldn't have a lion, I wouldn't have this, wouldn't have that. So anyway, so I had other options. So
okay, yeah, I understand. But I mean, wow, it is incredible that we got a director as you here in Mexico shooting and making all this stuff, because I mean, this combination of the nature here in Mexico and the demography with your experience, I think it's something awesome. So it's incredible to hear everything that you are telling us. And also, right now, we are going to make another combination that you got, but this was with Las Vegas and with a little Irish guy that we know as Leprechaun. So my question will be, the franchise, it started before with Leprechaun 1 and Leprechaun 2. So how was that Bryan get on Leprechaun 3 and started to be in this film? How was the development of the production of this film? Because I know there were not too many days of this production. So it will be interesting to know, how did you come to this franchise? How was your experience? And also the production story about it.
Well, do you have 3 hours?
Well,
Well,
it will be awesome. We need that.
Yeah. Well, I had made a horror comedy called Night of the Demons 2, the sequel to Night of the Demons, which proved to be quite successful. And so I was offered what was to be the last of the 3 Leprechaun movies. It was going to be a trilogy, and they tried to shoot the second one and the third one back to back, and neither worked out, and they had to combine both movies into one movie, which became Leprechaun 2. And I think it was intended to be Bride of Leprechaun. So they decided that didn't work out too well. We'll just reduce the budget further, and get outside producers to produce the next one, and let it be their problem, because obviously the executives were all fighting themselves with each other over how to keep changing the script of number 2 during production, which must have made it very hard for the director. Well, I wasn't going to have any of that. So I said, I want to make it funny. If you want to make it funny, I'm your man, because it's not going to be scary. He's not scary. Don't tell me he's scary. Do you see anybody being scared by number 1 or number 2? No. Let's make it funny. It's silly. Let's enjoy it. And they got it. and they gave me my head, and ultimately did not end up on a silver platter because the film went and sold 55,000 VHS units, which made it handsomely profitable. Not that I received any of my percentage, but of course that is another story.
Oh.
But well, you know how creative accountants can be,
Yeah.
and it's now in the hands of Lionsgate. So there you go. But I enjoyed working with these producers on Night of the Demons 2. And so when they came to me as the new producers of the Leprechaun franchise, I said, yes, I'm going to make it funny. And it worked. And then I said, well, if you want to do another one? Apparently they did. They had an idea, Trimark had an idea of Apollo 13, with the leprechaun inside it saying, yeah, Houston, we have a problem. And it was really a piece of artwork they designed for a Christmas party that was celebrating, I guess, all their releases. And it was almost like a joke idea for what the next one should be. But they kind of sort of, well, maybe we should, maybe that's a good idea. I mean, Jason went to space, so why not? So I said, well, that's, Apollo 13 will limit you in scope. It's a pretty small ship. What about going for the aliens formula? Space Marines hunting a creature who turns out to be a leprechaun armed with a lightsaber in his shillelagh. So they said, okay, go for it. And because my previous leprechaun had done really good business, they again gave me my head. And so I made it pretty wacky. It's a pretty high camp, movie parody of, favorite sci-fi moments, spliced into the Leprechaun franchise. But I thought that would be different. That would be new. We've had 3 movies exploring Irish cultural jokes. Why don't we now, if we're going to go science fiction, we're going to go off world and really into fantasy, not that we weren't there already, then, why don't we really go for it and explore, have fun with the movies that have explored this territory before. And there's a lot of that thinking in some of my films, Man from Hong Kong, Death Cheaters, Stunt Rock. Those are kind of genre homages that reflect my affection and my amusement at the particular genre that I'm engaged in. I made 3 war movies, which I did not make as camp and over the top. I made them realistically. So I make films for what I perceive their audience expects from them. And the Leprechaun franchise and the Night of the Demons, they want laughs and gasps. And mainly they got laughs in the Leprechaun series. But it had some good makeup effects. Yeah, the spider scorpion was quite something. Anyway, you must have another question.
What do you think it is like? You told us about what do you think the audience will like? Right now the audience has more voice than in the past because of social media and stuff like that. So it will be really interesting. What do you think about which one will be the balance right now in the actual movies?
Very complex question. I will try to give you a simple answer. And it's possibly the way to do it is to explain a bit about what formed my filmmaking thinking.
Okay.
And that is trailers.
Okay.
I made a lot of trailers before I made my first film. And when I grew up in England, the British theatres in the country, as opposed to the West End of London, the Premier End, the British theatres showed double features. There'd be the main feature, be it American or British. There'd be a newsreel. There'd maybe sometimes even be a Disney cartoon or something, or Popeye cartoon. And maybe a 1 hour supporting feature or 70-minute Western, that American B movie. And there would be trailers, and the trailers would start the whole session. And I would see the trailers at the beginning of the movie and see the whole program. And at the end, when the session ended in Britain, you could stay on to the next session. Once you bought a ticket, you could stay in the theater till it closed. So I would sometimes stay on just to see those trailers again, because I was interested in why did they choose that bit or that bit. And then I would see the movies next week, and then I would see, they chose that bit, and that bit. Yeah, I get it. That made me want to see the film. So that became a career interest for me, identifying audience taste and then trying to reflect it in what I came up with. And when I was 16, I'd seen a British movie called The Camp on Blood Island, a sort of World War II escape drama. So I wrote Escape from Blood Island and sent it into Hammer Films. Never got a reply, but that's all right. You don't get a reply from unsolicited material unless it's endorsed by an agent or a producer. But it was practice for me, think of it that way. So I tend to try and identify what an audience enjoys in a movie and then try to pack as much of that stuff into the movie. And trailers can make a film very entertaining in 2 minutes. So if you then take that 2 minutes and try and expand it back out to 90 minutes and keep filling it with stuff that they want to see, as opposed to longueurs, as the French would say, sections where you're just marking time, or it's boring. Don't be boring. Bad, yeah. Entertainment shouldn't be boring. An art film can be boring and no doubt very good for you. But look, I don't mean to be anti-intellectual and disparage art movies. Quite the opposite. And there are, Amores Perez, which is probably not an art movie in Mexico, but it was in the US. But I've seen a few Mexican films, and of course, Guillermo del Toro was a remarkable man. And look at his horror films. Now, there's a man who knows what he's doing. But anyway, and I'm sure he understands what his audience wants to see, but he's able to spin these tales on a grander, more epic scale, and with maybe some a deeper examination of the human psyche than, let's say, my movies do. My movies are more the sort of meat and potatoes of horror, whereas his is the more sort of refined cuisine, shall we say.
And also, I think Guillermo del Toro makes like romanticist horror, because I don't know, I think he knows what the people want because he's a fan of it, He was a fan of the 80s, 70s horror stuff, So
that's right.
And the passion and the love, it is on the movies. So I think that is something incredible, But for me, it is really interesting, the fact of the trailers that you are talking about, because there are many directors, such as Eli Roth, that right now, that in the past, he made like a trailer of Thanksgiving, like a short trailer, like fake trailer,
Yeah.
or comedy, horror comedy, and now that developed to a full movie. So
Yes.
because the people love it, because they say like, wow, this is awesome. Does this movie exist? And they were like, no, this is just pure fun. But they do it.
Did Thanksgiving play well in Mexico?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, we love slasher.
Good.
We love blood and guts. So
okay, good.
yeah.
Well, so that's my filmmaking influences, which makes me want to sort of cut to the chase all the time. Get on with it. They've come here to see a certain kind of entertainment. Let's put it together as with as much pace as possible.
I love it. I think that kind of perspective in the making of movies, it is great. And also I think that will be like a good strategy also for indie filmmakers to know how it will respond a film, like a film that they want to create. So for me, that is awesome, because I think that is a good strategy also for the development of a film. It is interesting. Also, I want to know, well, these three movies, that is Demons 2, Leprechaun 3, and Leprechaun 4, it is interesting because are horror comedy. And it will be incredible to know, as a director, Bryan, for you, what is the main importance on making a balance of horror comedy, And how do you manage to develop a Leprechaun with the deaths, with the dialogues, which was, I don't know, when you start to direct it, what do you think it was like the main importance in horror comedy?
My horror comedies tended to lean more towards comedy than horror. Though Night of the Demons 2, I think, has enough good slasher moments and horror moments in it to satisfy the audience. And there are moments that people who are susceptible to such things actually find scary. I don't find much scary. Real life is scary. The balance tended to be more in the comedy. And I think I got the balance. I skewed the Leprechaun 4 more in the area of parody, sci-fi parody, sort of spliced into a Leprechaun movie. With Leprechaun 3, we had a sort of a realistic, credible background that everyone could relate to. The sort of the playing of the comedy and the pitching of the jokes was not as extreme as it was in Leprechaun in Space. It was more, while it was still heightened, it was still comedy playing. It was grounded in the location and the setting that the film required. Leprechaun goes to Vegas, the capital of greed, and wreaks havoc on people we all don't really like. That is part of the appeal of horror films. We want to see people we don't like get sliced and diced. Sometimes I think horror films make a mistake of making the supporting characters, who are basically sort of for future butchery, too unsympathetic in their development. And so after a while you think, well, hurry up and kill this guy. He's a pain in the ass. Donde está el gringo pendejo? It's a phrase that I actually used during the shooting of Tarzan when an American actor was late for set. So I picked up a few interesting phrases, perhaps some that I cannot use on this podcast while I was in Mexico. So, anyway, I had a good time. So back to your question, balance of comedy. You could say that I got the balance wrong, possibly, as far as the distributor was concerned, insofar as I didn't make both films gorier. But I felt that if I made Leprechaun in three gorier, it might actually diminish the appeal slightly for a wider audience than the core audience. I'm always interested in trying to extend the core audience of something to a wider audience by putting in something maybe a little innovative or stretching the boundaries a little bit. And so that was my thinking. So I could have made both films gorier, but I felt that would have fought the comedy, and particularly in Leprechaun in Vegas. Now, maybe I should have sensibly beefed up the gore in Leprechaun in Space, but I was more focused on trying to, make an interesting spider monster, and it was a constant challenge to try and pull this thing off on the kind of money that we had. So, ultimately, I have to do it my way, and my way can be wrong or it can be right. It would appear I was right about Leprechaun 3 because it really took off. And the fact that it is still popular in Mexico on St. Paddy's night, then, hey, works for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is incredible. And also, I think these gore aspects, I love it, they're cool. But I think with the Leprechaun character, it is more cartoonish, So
Yes.
I think it was incredible as you do the deaths, because we got this death in Leprechaun Space. I remember a lot when there's a guy, I don't remember the name, but there is a guy that grabs a knife and puts it on Leprechaun. And this Leprechaun, he puts angry, and he, with his magic tricks, he starts to throw stuff, and then he throws like a metal circle to his face, and then he back in the wall. He got his face all smashed. Like, it is funny. I love it.
Yes, well, I thought it would be a good gag too, and we had a prosthetic makeup master in Gabe Bartolos, who's made many films, and he was in charge of the Leprechaun makeup for all of them. We said, well, what other good stuff can you do? Can you make me a spider scorpion? Can you make me this, make me that? And he had his own ideas, and he said, well, what if we did something that smashed into a guy's face and made him look like a flattened pizza? I thought, lovely. Yes. Lovely. So I designed the sequence so that I think its impact comes from a particular shot, in the sort of the grammar of the sequence. You have the Leprechaun throw the pizza tray, and then the shot that really makes the payoff worthwhile is the spinning tray, which we hung on wires and then dollied with it towards the victim, and with the kind of whirring sound that we put on. And then, you see, then when we have the moment of impact, and then we've made him up now and taken 2 hours to make him into pizza face, and we do another shot where the pizza pan just seems to, having landed, just drops off his face, revealing a pizza face. And it's a great reveal, and it works. And so, I knew when he gave me that idea that we would get, a good moment for the audience to go, that's what I came to be.
Lovely, as you say. Lovely is the word.
Lovely. Yes.
I love it. No, and it is one of the most iconic scenes in the movie, so it is incredible.
Well, did you like the spider scorpions?
Yeah, I love it. It was like a really good plot twist, because I didn't imagine it. So it was lovely. Also that, and I think it is incredible because you got like these two to monsters. For me, it is that awesome, you know?
Yeah.
No, I think it's lovely. I love that phrase that you said, because that's a phrase I have for this movie. It's lovely. A lot of the practical effects and the decisions that you got are that worth. So it is incredible.
Good.
I got this on mind, that always that I say leprechaun in space. I mean, I imagine the big leprechaun, the spider, that death that I told you, but also I got this leprechaun get out from a penis. That's right. So it is kind of funny that.
Yeah. No, I wanted to see. I am a child of Monty Python.
Love
Are you
it.
familiar?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where a lot of my thinking has come from. I am a somewhat irreverent iconoclast. I am anti-authoritarian. Certainly, the authoritarianism that Donald Trump proposes for the world, I am against. And I hope everybody is worried because, yeah, he and his allies overseas would like to see authoritarianism spread across the world, which will make it so much easier for the oligarchs in life, and not very much easier for us.
No,
but so my films have a slightly irreverent and anti-authoritarian twist to some of them, and Megiddo, a Mega Code 2, should be seen in the context that is kind of prescient for its day. Now we have a populist demagogue confidence man who is, has poisoned the political discourse and is in danger of changing the world in a bad way. So if you look at Michael York's performance in Omega Code 2 as the Antichrist, who has somehow taken over the European Union and is looking to conquer America, it's an interesting, interesting analogy. But media mogul, demagogue, super rich man, sounds familiar.
Yeah,
anyway,
sounds. I know you are famous as a B-movie director, exploitation, as we will talk about your book, but also in your book you say one of the phrases is king of exploitation. So I would love to hear what do you think is the magic of B-movies, of the B-movies in the industry, for you as Bryan, and the impact in your life. What do you think is the magic of B-movies in everything, in filmmaking, in horror, in the direction, in the productions? As for you, what is the magic in B-movies?
I don't know. You see, so many of the major studio movies made for $100 million or more are really B movies, B movie plots, B movie ideas, but given mega budgets to disguise their lack of originality, perhaps, but also to give the fans something. The fans keep wanting more. I want a bigger battle scene. I want a bigger monster. I want a woman with bigger tits. I don't know. So it depends on your taste. But
sure.
And look, you see in as far as screen nudity is concerned, you see how gradually a bare back was permitted in French movies in the 50s, and gradually crept into British movies in the 60s, and finally in the 70s we got tits and ass and legs, and then pretty much after that we had pubic hair and dicks, and maybe more than we really wanted, but so I'm interested in the way cinema tastes evolve. Hence if you look at my website, you'll see a piece, an essay I wrote about the history of censorship as I experienced it, or going to the movies in England in the 60s and 70s. Anyway, I digress, but the Leprechaun character himself is deliberately obnoxious, and we kind of sometimes secretly admire obnoxious people who say the silent part out loud. And he says racist things, he says sexist things, he is no respecter of authority, he's only a respecter of his own needs. Yeah, I think we know a politician like that too. But so he represents a certain type, but also he's getting the best of people we don't like. But the Leprechaun is a mocker of established values and morality. And so I try to explore that and also explore the connection between that character and popular culture, particularly reflected in the TV commercials that we see in both those two movies, the fake commercials or infomercials. And the way porn comes right out of your TV screen and then sits on you and electrocutes you to death. Yes, lovely.
Lovely.
And I think, and a moral point. Do I occasionally make a moral point? Yes, not very often. Anyway, there you go.
Wow, that's an awesome answer. I love it. And also, yeah, it is the exploitation also stuff that it was prohibited in the past. And then it starts to evolve to not being prohibited and being something that the people want. Because it was once it was prohibited and the people want that to watch it. And also the critique that also the horror does it very well. And the exploitation movies for me and the B movies for me are the ones that tell you more this critique about stuff. And they show you more the part that maybe some persons don't want to show it. As Donald Trump, we talk about it. But the people wants to consume that. And it is incredible because we have watched it on the horror.
Horror was, it was popular entertainment at the sort of considered at the basest level. It was, it was, unsophisticated filmmaking. It was catering to lowbrow tastes, but it made enough money for the studios to want to fund it on a certain level. And they found that they could if they made them really cheaply, as they did by the late 30s through the 40s and into the early 50s. And that's when sci-fi started to improve the whole genre as well. But the classic Gothic horrors were the classics that, monsters that Universal owned. And then that was a cheaply made co-feature genre that did well for them. But I mean, I think Island of Lost Souls was a 1932 very interesting early horror film that was made with quite a lot of money for its day. And Bride of Frankenstein should certainly, that was a handsome production, and there should have been more along those lines. But they felt, no, it needs to be made cheaper and we'll have the same audience and no risk. And so that's what they did.
It was great.
Yes.
It was great, that direction. And, well, the final question. As I told you in the message, and as I told you with Group Underworld, Grupo Inframundo, we got this segment called Artists from the Underworld, in which we try to interview people that are in the industry of horror, and people that are in any way related to horror, even filmmaking, literature, products, services, everything about horror. We try to make this segment so we can inspire future filmmakers in horror or future persons that want to develop stuff related with horror or their subgenres, because we want to make the nightmares become real. So for me, it is really interesting if you could give us, as a director, producer, writer, what advice could you give to all the people that want to be any of those things? in the filmmaking industry. What will be your best advice?
Ooh, well, okay. Well, my advice would be similar to advice I give to any filmmaker wanting to, make something in a new genre. It all comes down to story and character. What is the story arc? What is the central character with whom the audience is meant to identify going to learn from the experience that character goes through? Of course, that character may end up dead at the end of the film. Shock, sad ending. Or that character may triumph and survive, defeat the monster, get the girl, etc. So there are many ways the story can go, but the audience wants to follow a character and become credibly involved in the events that happen to that character. That's one thing that applies to horror, comedy, adventure, fantasy. It's the same disciplines of writing drama. You have to find someone to fix on and follow that journey to the end and be satisfied. That's the key. Be satisfied with the outcome. And there are tons of horror films that have actually done that. So that's one aspect. And you simply apply that discipline to the horror story you want to tell. Now, secondly, is how can you tell that story with surprises? You're entering a field where the story, in broad principle, has been probably told before. Dracula, Frankenstein, King Kong. So how do you give it a new flavor, a new angle for the audience to come at it? How do you do what Tarantino did with the genres that he tackled, which was to mix the time frames, to engage in the concept of the unreliable narrator. And there are many writers' tricks that you can bring to enliven relatively familiar material and make it unfamiliar, or make the audience wonder what is going to happen next, because that just surprised me, and yet I did not find it lacking credibility. I believed in it, but what's going to happen next? So you want them thinking that. So I suppose my advice is more to do with filming a drama that just happens to be a horror movie. Now, with horror, you have to do your research and look at what people have been enjoying, and imagine and examine or analyze why you think they enjoyed those particular kills, set pieces, whatever, moods. Look at the mood that Kurosawa brought to his areas of ghost stories and so forth. And there are all sorts of ways that you can create mood, and there are many examples of different moods. So you have to look at the mood and tone of your horror film, where you're possibly less concerned with that in a comedy. If I had to make a Frankenstein movie, I'd look at some various Frankenstein movies of the past, most of which I have seen, and think, okay, what's a new wrinkle? And of course, now that's just been done. Now, not that that's a horror film, but it's a film that it takes its genre and then pushes the boundaries. So, I have to go now, sadly. You're a very interesting fellow. You're very well educated in this field, and I'd love to talk to you some more. But maybe sometime you take a look at a film of mine called Dead End Drive-In, which has just been remastered on Blu-ray with the original Australian version soundtrack, which the American release, they cut 6 minutes of Australian dialogue out of it because, well, they wanted to make it look like an American movie, which being set in a drive-in, it could be. And that was part of its commercial thinking, was this will play in America because they're familiar with those places, even though they're now all dying out. But as they were, the VHS movies I was starting to make were killing the drive-ins. But because you could get all that stuff you couldn't get on broadcast television, and went to the drive-ins to see, and or the grindhouse theaters downtown, but because you didn't get tits and ass on television, you didn't get blood hitting the screen, but you could get it at the drive-in. Now you can get it on VHS. The drive-in died.
Wow, I need to watch it. I need to acquire, and it will be great to also talk about it in the next interview. And
sure. It's
awesome.
Available from Umbrella Entertainment in Australia. Go contact them and say you've just done a podcast with me, and a future podcast may feature this movie. Could they send you a copy?
Well, thank you very much, Bryan, for this interview, and to all the people that are watching us. Well, here is Bryan, one of the masters of the horror, and one of the masters of big movies, and one of the masters of filmmaking for myself. Thank you very much, everybody. Bryan, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye, Mexico. I'd love to come back and make a movie, preferably a horror film.
It will be incredible. Thank you. Bye-bye, people.
My pleasure.